Hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 64554637228 and the splintering of America, and in fact the entire world, is actually perfectly natural and to be expected. The question is, how can we actually reverse it or slow it or just maintain some kind of unity? Anyway, my name is Earthling64 yada yada yada. I am a guy without a wife and kids, but I still try to do as many interesting things as I can. Actually, I guess I can do a lot more than many other people with wife and kids. So I've lost 85 pounds from my maximum weight, kept it off. I quit smoking. I at least control my drinking. I have an MBA computer science degree and I've traveled a bit. So that's me for now. Now, for many people who have access to American media, and even if they don't, the idea is that you would look and see that the world is kind of splintering apart. In America, at least, it's Republican versus Democrat. It might be evangelicals versus atheists or some other delineation. There might be cracks spreading throughout the world. And this is 100% natural. You can't go from, if you believe in Adam and Eve, from two individuals to close to 8 billion and expect that there's going to be a strong unity amongst these 8 billion odd people. It's just not possible. As a matter of fact, there should probably be even more division than there already is at the moment. I have been looking over the countries in the world. I just figured it's about time for me to have at least some idea about every country in the world. Not a whole encyclopedical knowledge of every single country, but just to know maybe where it is, some one or two basic facts about it. And in reading Wikipedia, and mainly Wikipedia and Google Maps to see where these places are, and I read about all of the different languages in all of these, I guess you would say, native countries. For example, they actually speak their own language in Nepal. They speak Nepali. Now, for somebody like myself, like many other people who may be in, the new world, the idea of having your own specific language and not English or French or Portuguese or one of these big European languages is just like, what? That's crazy. But of course, Portugal speaks Portuguese. The UK speaks English. In France, you speak French. So that's not really quite amazing. And of course, in Africa and in India, and for the few indigenous Native Americans in the U.S., Canada, wherever, in South America and the whole of Asia, there are people who would speak their indigenous language still. There are even going to be, depending on where you are, large groups of people who speak their indigenous language. And yeah, that's just how the world is. But even if you go to Latin and you recognize that Rome conquered all of these different countries, the languages or Latin in all of those different countries, it turned into French in France. It turned into Spanish in Spain. It turned into Italian, or I guess Latin turned into Italian. It turned to, or it contributed to many of these different languages. It just broke apart and changed and kept changing. And even English is like that. Britain hasn't been ruling all of these different territories for thousands of years. Probably not even like hundreds, but yeah, in many instances, hundreds of years. And of course, they are become independent from Britain. But to hear people speak English in many different countries, it's almost unintelligible when people speak in their native English. The English that they speak in India has a lot of differences to UK English. And even within the UK, with people who, their native language is English, there's such a wide disparity of slightly different accents and intonations and vocabulary, from Cockney to the English of the aristocrats to all of the different villages. You can tell that people speak their English differently. And for people who are used to TV, you would have heard an Australian accent and be able to understand what they're saying. You might have heard all the different American accents that there are, and you might be able to appreciate it. But still, when those people start speaking to someone else from their area in their quote unquote native English, you're probably not going to get it, except for the major accents that we see on TV or radio or whatever. You're probably going to be a lot confused. And again, that's going to be perfectly natural. One of the things that I found from listening or reading up on these different countries is that they were saying that in some countries, for example, maybe Nepal is where I read this, from valley to valley to valley, people would not be able to readily understand each other. That's just from a day's walk from one place to the other. People would find it hard to understand what the other person was saying. So it's not really amazing that there would be such steep and stark divisions among people in the USA, for example, or in Europe, between the European countries. And the question is, how long are these different entities actually going to manage to stay unified as population grows and as time passes? How are they going to maintain it? This idea of what it is to be an American, sooner or later it will be, if it is not maintained, like, everybody knows McDonald's and likes their representative. Everybody, because of TV, everybody stays to a degree, especially because of newscasters. Newscasters fight hard to get rid of whatever local dialect they may have or whatever local accent they may have so that they can travel around the US, from station to station, and not have a difficulty in finding work or have people discriminate against them to say, oh, you're not really from this area. So there's this generic accent. And that's probably the case across the world in different countries as well. So that can preserve a kind of, what is it called, lingua franca, or a common language that everybody can understand and perhaps speak. But even beyond that, The fact is that the different parties, in order to distinguish themselves, if you're going to talk about political divisions, in order to distinguish themselves, they have to take positions that are diametrically opposed to the other party all the time, regardless of whether it's a good idea or not. They need to distinguish themselves. Whatever country you're in, the other group or the other groups can't be seen to imitate many of the, or what they would consider, major points of another party. If you are just a poor man's version of this other party, why wouldn't people just vote for that other party as opposed to wasting their vote on you, a small party? So hopefully, the good ideas are not split, half of them in one party, half of them in the other party. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Um, Whatever it is that the other party stands for, you have to stand against it. Otherwise, people. So there's no guarantee ever that half of the ideas that you think are good ideas are not completely absurd and and even detrimental to your country, wherever it is that you live. So, as we can see clearly, with respect to people who think that this illness is real and they think that it is harmful to whatever country they live in, some of them are going to be supporting parties that are going to be pushing the completely opposite narrative, that it's just like a cold, or that doing anything to try to suppress it doesn't make any sense, whether it's a vaccine or anything else for that matter. And that is not going to help whatever country or area that you live in, because it means that a sizable proportion of, if not half of the country approximately, is going to be actively campaigning and fighting against or fighting for the virus in many instances. And that is really sad. It's not necessarily something that you would see in nature, where, you know, different, an animal might split into different species, but you can't say necessarily that the two species might be actively fighting against each other. Um, they might eventually at some point, but that's not straight out of. It's not going to be some kind of a calling cry to get the species to stay cohesive, for that matter. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I guess that's it for me. So feel free to like, subscribe, dislike, comment, share, any of those things. And of course, keep in mind that you'd probably want people to do something positive with respect to feedback if this were your piece. Have a good one. Peace.